get started. I think people will drift in as we're chatting, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our two speakers who are going to be talking about the GMO issue. They're going to both have some things to say, and then we'll have some question and answer, and then we'll move into a brief little talk about the food co-op. So I know that we have a lot of members here, but we have some non-members too, so we'll have a Q&A about that as well. So we have Tracy Lee here, who is the Home Garden Seed Manager for Sakata Seed Company. She has to do a lot of learning and dealing about GMO issues, so she's very knowledgeable. And then we have John McGoran, who is the Communications Director for Weaver's Way Co-op. Weaver's Way is a co-op with several locations, Elkins Park, Germantown, Mount Airy, and Chestnut Hill. And they've been helping us to kind of get going and sort of mentoring our food co-op. So, and John is also an author who's written or is writing or has written a thriller about surrounding the whole GMO issue. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. So thank you so much for being here.
Tag team it today. I'm going to start off talking about basically what GMOs are, what they're not. There will be probably a couple times I'll get in a little soapbox, but I'll try not to stay on it too long. I'll tell you a little bit about what's out there right now as far as GMOs, how to avoid them, barring any labeling that we don't have right now. And then I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to talk about what the health issues are, what the politics of it all is, and that type of thing. So we're trying to go through this really quickly so that you can ask some questions at the end. So I'm sure all of you know, but we wanted to start off really basic. What is a GMO? And the reason will become clear as we get more into the politics and the laws of this, of the movement of avoiding GMOs. The GMO, genetically modified organism, GE stands for genetically engineered. Now, as it stands today, GE and GMO are often interchanged. They're not the same thing. This is important because we need to start using correct terminology if we want laws to be passed so that we can avoid them in the future. Genetically engineered products describe more high-tech methods. It started in the 1980s. Genes are actually spliced from one organism into another. They do it using recombinant DNA techniques, gene blasting with guns like I'm sure you've all seen on television programs. In the lab. So basically you've got lab coats in the lab splicing genes from one non-sexually compatible crop into another, and it results in a plant that you would never see in nature. So it's completely engineered by human manipulation. So why differentiate? As we said, GE crops, completely man-manipulated, transferring genes. GMO is the term we use now, but this is what's important. It's currently defined by, GMO is currently defined by the USDA, and the definition they use is an organism that is produced through any type of genetic modification. That means if a farmer was out in the field 50 years ago picking the taller plants to keep, USDA defines that as GMO. So if we keep using that term, and laws then are made using that term, we're giving the people that we're against an out, and that's what's happening. So it's important to remember, or to me, it's important to remember as an industry person, to try to get people to start using GE, genetically engineering. That's what we're against. That's what we don't want in our food. And GMO is a broader term that can mean anything from a selected variety, a hybrid variety that's crossed by regular methods, and it includes GE items as well. So for example, a seedless watermelon, any broccoli that you buy in the grocery store, any tomato that you buy in the grocery store is a GMO because it's genetically modified as defined by the USDA. So, again, that was my little soapbox. It's annoying, it's semantics, but as more legislation is drafted and as we try to get things passed, we need correct terminology. The companies that are developing and marketing GE varieties are using this confusing terminology to their end. It's very easy for them to say, GMOs are technically fine by the USDA to include 90% of fresh produce. Therefore, we can't label it. That's what they're saying. So when you hear that over $50 million is spent to prevent Prop 37 in California, this is one of the messages they were trying to get out. It's inconsistencies in language, and it's a way to prevent the laws from happening. And in fact, well, and this is an example, we pulled these images. GMO, genetically engineered. GMO, genetically engineered. Two different things. I'm really good friends with the #1 organic seed producer in the United States. She is from California, and she was against the labeling only for this issue. Because she knows that if it's passed with the wrong terminology, then all of a sudden you're going to have broccoli regulated and regular tomatoes regulated. So in the rest of this, you'll see my GMO / with GE. It's a way to start incorporating both of the terms. So what crops now are, yeah.
So, I'm sorry, does that mean that when you say GMO / GE, you're
I'm
talking
saying,
about
you know it's
genetically
GMOs,
engineered?
but they're really genetically engineered crops.
Okay, so this is genetically engineered. This is the sliced by lab coat people.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. I understand.
In the California proposition was for GMOs, the broader category, and that was the issue that you were in.
Well, one of the many ways the Monsantos of the world tried to prevent it from happening. Yeah. So this is what's out there now. This is, if you want to know what GMOs, GEs are on the market. Alfalfa just came on the market last year, so we don't have a good solid count of how many acres. And by the way, all this is APHIS, which is the USDA division of NOP, which is National Organic Program. They do these figures every year to keep up with this type of stuff. Canola right now, we're at about 90% of the U.S. crop, which is mainly used for oil. Corn, we're about at 88%. This is almost all field corn, which is used for livestock feed and in processing, like high fructose corn syrup. But now we also have some sweet corn, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Cotton, which you wouldn't think would be a food crop, but it is used in oil. Papaya. Soy, 94% of the U.S. soy crop. So, if you don't buy organic soy, you're eating a GMO. Sugar beets, 95%. So, unless an item says pure cane sugar, if you eat anything with sugar, you're eating GMOs.
And again, so because I'm confused now.
Yeah. Well, GMO, GEs.
I was frankly, you say GEs then.
Yeah.
Because if that's the real issue,
Okay.
I did not know what you were saying.
Yeah.
So all of these are GEs?
GEs, yes.
Okay.
Zucchini and yellow summer squash. This right now, except for the little bit of sweet corn, is the only fresh produce item in the stores that is genetically engineered. So when you go, which we'll talk about later, when you go to the grocery store, there are only two things in the fresh produce section that you would be looking for that are genetically engineered. That would be green and yellow zucchini and some sweet corn. So looking a little bit at the history, what came out, how it did, where we're going. 1994 was the first GE to come out commercially on the market, the Flavor Saver tomato. It didn't last very long. Okay, 1997 it was taken out, so there are no genetically engineered tomatoes in commercial production today. Same thing with potatoes. The new leaf potato was introduced in '96. It was taken out in 2001, and again, there are none in commercial production.
Why were they taken out?
Consumer backlash. It was used mostly at fast food restaurants, but even when the word was out, the people that ate at the fast food restaurants still didn't want to eat genetically engineered products. So, and wheat. There's not any wheat genetically engineered wheat on the market. Monsanto developed a variety of genetically engineered wheat. They did a test on it. It's not commercially labeled. It's never been commercially produced. So that's typically the one that everybody thinks that wheat is genetically engineered. It is not. There's one out there, they may in the future decide to reintroduce it, but right now it's not in production. Very recently, Monsanto, for some reason, developed GE pumpkins. I'm not quite sure why this is, because as I will say later, typically they only do this for very high value crops. Pumpkins is not one of them. However, I was in a meeting literally 3 weeks ago, and they announced that Monsanto had dumped this project due to the lack of margin money, and that they didn't think it would be well received. So sweet corn, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of corn out there is for feed and corn oil production and corn syrup. But there are sweet corn varieties now that just came on the market. I listed exactly the ones that they are. These are the only ones. So if you do want to buy sweet corn, it's very easy to buy locally and to ask your farmer, is it one of these varieties? Session 2, Passion 2, Temptation 2, and Attribute 4. Those are the 4. There's another experimental one coming out that hasn't been named yet, but those are the 4. The Session, Passion, and Temptation just were planted for the very first time this last season, so you would see them this season for the first time, but the Syngenta one, Attribute, has been out since 1998. And then a couple of meats, fish, which John will talk about in more detail because that's his forte. There's salmon, currently petitioning for approval to the FDA, and there was a pig, GE variety, the Enviro pig, but that program fell out of favor again because of backlash, and the actual pigs themselves were euthanized this year. So, knowing that, I want to talk just a few minutes about when you go to the grocery store, how can you avoid it? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to completely avoid GMOs, you're going to have a hard time. GEs, thank you. See? Especially if you go out to eat. If you eat out at a restaurant ever, then give it up, unless you're going to tell them not to use oil. And if they use oil, they can only use olive oil, and everything is locally sourced and locally grown, then maybe you can get away with it. It's hard to find restaurants who will only do that. But anyway, when you go to the grocery store, you're going to have primary exposure and secondary exposure to items in the grocery store. As I mentioned, the produce section is going to be pretty easy. When you go to the grocery store, if it is a non-organic green or yellow zucchini or a non-organic sweet corn, you could be exposed to GMOs. Otherwise, you're fine. In packaged foods is where it hits you. So I always tell people just don't eat packaged foods, which is possible because I do it. And it includes no sugar of any kind. It doesn't help me in any way except that I know I'm not eating cheese. So the items that are the highest on the list of GEs in packaged foods, non-organic packaged foods, corn, corn flour, cornmeal, any oil, like I said, except olive oil, any soy flour, soy protein, soy isolate, any sugar except cane sugar, anything with high fructose corn syrup. And the list goes on with smaller, additive, weird named items. I put a website on here, responsibletechnology.org. They have a non-GMO shopping brochure you can download. This is a list of invisible GM ingredients that's in that brochure. So you're talking anything from citric acid to lactic acid to maltol to tofu to soy milk to soy sauce. So if you want to get all the weird little things, and again, it's in processed, packaged, bottled, condiment, that type of thing, then I would say go to this website and download this shopping brochure.
That's the website on the bottom of that page.
Yeah, responsibletechnology.org. And right on the front, they'll say, download our non-GMO shopping brochure.
So even they're using the term non-GMO.
Yeah.
So we're not ever going to change this until
No.
these organizations start changing.
Right, as you can see, I talk about it all the time, and I still do
I
it.
mean, I do wonder if trying to get USDA to change their use of GMO might actually at this point be, that's something we can talk about later, but that might be more fruitful. You know, instead of trying to change the entire world's use of the phrase.
I don't expect, and that's why I say I / interchangeably use it, but my point is,
Right.
if something's gonna go down on paper, it
But
better
right
be
now,
checked
right,
technology.
And when you say that shopping list, that's a non-GE
Correct,
shopping.
yes, but it's called non-GMO shopping.
And if it is organic, then there is no, I mean, is that a guaranteed part of organic?
If it's a fresh organic product, then yes. If it is a packaged organic product, then it has to be 70%, guaranteed 70% free unless they test it, and even in testing, they find traces. And the only law that has to be followed is that you're doing your best effort. So if that's good enough for you, then.
So with the packaged frozen food, a vegetable, 70% of it has to be clear of GE.
Organic. If it's a package, if it's an organic packaged processed food, like organic pizza, at least 70% of it
Not
has to be
straight,
guaranteed.
right,
Yeah,
on the
organic
frozen
vegetables.
vegetables.
So the frozen green bean
Right,
is 100%. To the best of their knowledge, as long as there's no drift.
And on the oils,
Yeah.
you mentioned canola and cottonseed before, but like sunflower, peanut, are those also
No.
genetically engineered?
They're not, but they're often mixed. When they're used
Yeah,
in processed foods, they're mixed.
Right, right.
But if you buy
If you read the label.
straight peanut
Yeah.
oil,
Or sunflower or
then
sunflower.
you're, okay. But in processed foods, I don't think, or you rarely find them not mixed, yeah. Bakery section, you're pretty much not gonna find anything because everything has sugar. And they're not gonna be using pure cane sugar unless you find a really nice bakery who only uses pure cane sugar. So then you have the whole secondary exposure issue, which is dairy and meat, and that comes into the animals fed, unless they're organically labeled as organic, the animals are fed crops that are GE. So you're getting that secondary, and so then that's up to you to decide if that's where you draw the line or not.
So going back to that issue, is it fair to ask, and of course so it's fair, if you're purchasing meat from a cattle rancher, what they're feeding their cow?
Sure.
And if they're feeding their cow GE?
Yes, and I'll get into that a little bit later, of why and how they know that and why it's okay to ask. Yeah. So, and then well, here it is, right here. The best reason to buy local. So I just went over the regular grocery stores of the world, your local markets, farm stands, farm stores, co-op stores, CSA, farmers markets. They usually all label everything anyway, and they all know where it comes from, so you're off to a great start. But they also use small-scale farmers. Those small-scale farmers purchase all of their seeds through distributors that I sell to, and I know them all. And they always know, and they always disclose that they're selling GE seed to that farmer, and that farmer will always know if he's growing a GE seed. And that's whether he's growing conventionally or whether he's growing organically. So that's independent of him using a GE seed. They don't have anything to do with each other. So if you ask a local producer if he's using seed to plant for food crops or if he's using seed to plant for feed for his livestock or poultry or whatever, he will know if it's GE seed.
Can an organic cow be fed GE corn?
No, but that doesn't preclude a conventional cow from not being fed GE corn either if you know your local producer and you ask him.
Right.
And that's part of the organic regulations, correct? That there's no GE component, whether it's feed or in the
Correct.
animal or plant itself.
Yeah.
So,
Certified.
Correct.
fresh produce and meats, if they're organic, you're avoiding GE components. If it's prepared food, where if it's organic, you aren't necessarily.
Fresh
Produce.
Meats and dairy, if you buy organic, you're avoiding all GEs. Fresh produce,
On the organic vegetables or whatever, by the nature of them being organic, they're not just no pesticides, they're also non-GE.
that is correct. So that's buying your food, okay? So it's a completely separate issue growing your food. So let's talk about the presents. I'm way to your time, I'm sorry. Avoiding GE seed if you grow your own food. Right now, if you are a home gardener and you buy seed from anywhere, any packet of seed, anywhere, it is not GE, nothing. If you buy vegetable plants, if you buy zucchini or corn, you may be buying GE, but you shouldn't be buying zucchini and corn plants anyway because they're direct seed items that you should just direct seed your garden. So, if a seed is treated, doesn't mean it's GE. You might not want to plant it, it's not GE. Hybrid, not GE. Non-organic, not GE. Those are issues, those are reasons to not plant things above and beyond GE, but they're not the same as GE. So, there is something called the Safe Seed Pledge. Any company out there that wants to say, to make no question about it, that they're not selling GEs, they sign the Safe Seed Pledge. If you go to the Council for Responsible Genetics, they maintain the list. They created the Safe Seed Pledge, they maintain the list. But if you're ever in doubt, go to a company's website, or if they don't have a website, ask them. They'll want to tell you that they're not selling GE seed. It's kind of a redundant thing because they're not anyway, none of them are. So that's one issue for growing your own seed. There's a whole other political issue for growing, when you grow your own food, that you want to avoid purchasing seed from companies that buy their seed from Monsanto. That's a big thing out there now. It's all over the website. Seed companies are being boycotted all over the place because, okay, I'm just going to say a gigantic portion of that information out there is false. Because I know all the players and I know who buys what from whom, and it's a very, very small industry and it's false. So, there are a lot of popular home garden varieties that were developed in the 40s by a company called Peto Seed. That company was sold to a company called Simonis, and that company was sold to Monsanto. So, while Monsanto owns all these things now, all of the seed companies that sell to people like you and that sell to the farmers that grow your food, even at local markets, are still using some of those varieties that they have to get from Monsanto, but they're trying to replace them. But that takes time. They got to get rid of inventory. They got to find something that's just as good. They can't just switch out. So, knowing that means you have to make a conscious decision when you're boycotting things, people like that you're running the risk of either acting on false information that's out there, which is a lot of it, or you're harming often small, well-intentioned companies who are trying to do the right thing and move away from Monsanto varieties.
That's confusing. That's confusing because, I mean, it is, Monsanto does have a reputation for being the bully.
They are.
And evil.
But they're not in the home garden market. So by boycotting people like Botanical Interest, High Million Seeds, John Sheeper's Garden Seeds,
Who are
Johnny
all owned
Seeds,
by Monsanto.
they either buy Monsanto or they buy from Monsanto growers, or they're in the same field with Monsanto. None of these people grow their own stuff. It's all purchased from the same small group of people. So,
What's the false part then?
the false
Where's the
part is there
false
are
piece of
lists.
that?
There are lists on the internet that say these are all Monsanto varieties. Half of them aren't. There are lists out there that say these people all buy, exclusively these varieties from Monsanto. And while they might have a few varieties, they don't have these others. It's just not. It's just a slippery slope when you decide to boycott a lot of people. Well, I'm not saying not boycott Monsanto. I'm saying when you decide to boycott people who you think are in bed with Monsanto. Because right now they're all trying to get out of bed with them.
How
Trust
do you
me.
affect Monsanto if you're not affecting people buying their seed?
Well, that's what they're not affecting them. That's what I'm saying. Monsanto is trying extremely hard to rid themselves of the home garden market. They don't care about it, they don't want to deal with it, they don't make any money off of it. They want feed corn, they want chemicals, they want wheat if they can get it back in there. They want everything that a local farmer is never going to buy anyway, or a home gardener is never going to buy anyway. So I predict, I mean, we have seen all of Monsanto's downwind competitors have gotten a lot more business with people trying to get away from them. And between that and Monsanto trying to get out of business anyway, their home garden variety business isn't going to be around within 5 to 10 years anyway. So, I can see the argument for not wanting to give Monsanto money, but you're killing these small companies when you do that. And so, if that's still okay, it's okay, but it's just a decision that needs to be made with full information.
Does that mean that companies like Burpee and Shepherd Seeds do not buy from Monsanto?
They all do.
They all do.
Yeah.
Is there a
So
list?
there is a home
that
gardening
don't?
market.
They are, but they don't want to be in it, and they're trying to get out of it, and people like Burpee and John Sheepers and all these people are calling all of these other companies like us who don't sell GEs and saying, give us a variety that works just as good as that one, but it's not a Monsanto variety. And before they add it, they've got to test it, they've got to make sure it works, they've got to make sure it tastes good, they've got to make sure it does what their farmers and their home gardeners want it to do. They're not just going to literally switch it out. So, like I said, it's a process. It's happening, but it doesn't happen overnight.
So the home garden answer is the Semites?
The home garden answer is
If I'm in my seat, who do I buy?
if you buy seed, you're going to buy seed from everybody directly or indirectly in the seed industry is somehow profiting from Monsanto. So if you want to avoid that, the only way to avoid that is to go get your seed from somebody who's not commercially producing it, who's been saving it for 30 years from his granddad and great-granddad.
And who run it?
Their neighbor.
So
It's
does
not a
that mean
company.
that your company then also is somehow connected? I mean,
Our company is a
so you don't sell
competitor.
GMOs.
We don't sell genetically engineered seed.
So then theoretically, your company then would be a place to buy seed that is not
We don't
GMO,
sell to
that is
consumer.
not-
We sell to the same people
I see.
that
So maybe
Monsanto
you're looking for
sells.
specific varieties
Correct. And that,
from these competitors.
right,
from
and
these
that
people.
was, yeah.
It's the variety.
It's the variety issue. So if you go to the Monsanto website, they have a Seminous Home Garden section on the bottom here. And they have their catalog. Anybody can look at it. It's the same one we have if you go to our Sakata.com. Go to their website, download the Seminous Home Garden section, and you'll see all of their varieties. It's only the F1 hybrids, because they also carry open pollinated varieties that we carry, that 10 other people carry. So
And that's what they're trying to get out of now.
they're trying to get out the F1 hybrids and everything.
Right.
So but the hybrids are the only ones directly owned because they're hybrids by Monsanto. So, what's coming? Again, you're talking to the big bad players, Monsanto, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF, Dow, DuPont. They're only going to work with large-scale, high-dollar, high-profit commodity crops, which always go into packaged food, livestock feed, and oils. So meat, fish, dairy, seafood, good. Research is out there. People start it and they get scared because of the backlash. So it depends on how much consumer outcry there is. So to recap the 3 areas, companies that sell seed to home gardens, they don't have any intention of selling GE seeds unless the world really changes. They're scared to death of it. They don't want anything to do with it. No GE seed is sold to home gardeners. That means grow your own food, it's a completely safe way. So not have any GEs. Companies that sell to small-scale farmers, usually local producers, rarely offer GE seeds, although they do. But if they do, they have to disclose it. Therefore, if you're supporting a local grower or producer, you're really drastically decreasing your exposure. And all you have to do is ask. They will know, and they should tell you. So, until there's labeling, avoiding non-organic processed packaged foods with the offensive ingredients, non-organic meat, dairy, and zucchini and sweet corn is the way to reduce GE products. so sorry I took up so much time. So come on back here and talk about our stuff.
Could I ask one question?